You ever listen to an argument, maybe on the news or from a friend, and something just feels off? You can't quite put your finger on it, but you know the logic doesn't hold up. Well, we're bombarded with stuff like this every single day. So in this explainer, we're going to build a toolkit, a field guide, to help you cut through all that noise and spot faulty logic from a mile away.
I love this quote. It basically says that language itself can lay traps for us, little pitfalls that trip up our thinking. And that is exactly what we're going to be talking about today, how to spot those traps in the wild so we can all think just a little bit more clearly.
You know that feeling, right? Someone lays out a point that sounds really convincing on the surface, but your gut is just screaming, wait a minute, that doesn't add up. That feeling? That's your brain picking up on a hidden flaw in their reasoning. And today, we're going to give that feeling a name. And that name is a fallacy. Now, the most important part of this definition is right there at the start. Seems to be correct. That's what makes fallacies so sneaky. They aren't just dumb mistakes, they're clever disguises for bad arguments, which is why you see them everywhere. Okay, so let's dive into our first family of fallacies. I call these the fallacies of distraction. Think of it like a magician's trick, right? They get you to look over here so you don't see what's really happening over there. These arguments work by changing the subject entirely. First up, we've got the classic argument against the person, or if you want to be fancy, ad hominem. This is when someone just completely ignores an idea and instead starts attacking the person who said it, their character, their past, their motives. The actual point they were making totally gets thrown out the window. You see this, oh my gosh, all the time in politics. And here is a perfect real-world example. See what's happening? The argument isn't actually about the pros and cons of affirmative action. Instead, it just attacks the motivation of the people who oppose it, labeling them as racists. The actual substance of the policy debate gets completely ignored. All right, next up is another master of distraction, the straw man fallacy. Imagine you're in a fight, but instead of fighting a real person, you build a scarecrow out of straw and beat that up instead. You'd win pretty easily, right? Well, that's exactly what this fallacy does. You take your opponent's argument, twist it into a weaker, dumber version, and then you knock that down. Here we go, a great example. Someone might make a reasonable proposal to, say, enlarge administrative authority, but then their opponent twists that into this terrifying caricature of a big brother state that wants to spy on everyone. See? They're not debating the real idea anymore. They're fighting this scary fictional monster they just invented. Let's move on to our second category. With these fallacies, the evidence someone presents is actually relevant to their conclusion, but it's just way too weak to support it. The whole argument is basically built on a really shaky foundation that's about to collapse. Oh, this is a big one you will see everywhere, the false cause fallacy. The fancy Latin name basically just means after this, therefore because of this. It's that classic mistake of thinking that just because B happened right after A must have caused B. Our brains are wired to see patterns, and this fallacy takes advantage of that by confusing timing with causation. This quote is a textbook case. It takes two things that happened in the same time period, prayer leaving schools and social problems increasing, and it implies one caused the other, without a shred of actual evidence to connect them. Just because one thing followed another doesn't prove anything at all. Ah, the slippery slope. We've all heard this one. This fallacy argues that if we take one small, maybe even reasonable first step, we're going to start sliding down a hill and won't be able to stop until we crash and burn in some terrible, disastrous outcome. It predicts this whole chain reaction, but crucially, it never proves that the chain reaction is actually going to happen. And here you can see exactly how it works. The argument makes these giant leaps from one very specific step all the way to a full-on dystopian future, with a bunch of unproven and pretty dramatic steps in between. It's really just a scare tactic, designed to make you terrified of that first step by painting this absolute worst-case scenario. And that brings us to our final category. This group of fallacies is all about the trickiness of language itself. They happen when an argument works only because the words being used are confusing or their meanings keep shifting around. It's all about playing word games. Okay, let's pause here because we have two fallacies that are perfect mirror images of each other. Over on the left, you've got the fallacy of composition. This is where you assume that if every single part of a thing has some quality, then the whole thing must have it too. The example is great. Every single screw and gear in a machine might be light, but that doesn't stop the machine as a whole from weighing a ton. Now on the right, you have the exact opposite, the fallacy of division.
This is assuming that whatever's true for the whole thing must also be true for every one of its little parts. A company might be super important, but that doesn't mean every single person who works there is. Makes sense, right?
All right, enough theory. It's time for the fun part. Let's take your new fallacy spotting toolkit out for a test drive. We're going to look at a couple of quotes from the totally fictional but very fashionable Super Fashionality magazine. Your job is simple. Spot the fallacy. You ready? Let's do it. Okay, first up, we've got this gem from Whitney Hudson. Capybara fur is what everyone is wearing. If your clothes are made of regular fabric, you're totally being left behind. Gross. So, what's the faulty logic she's using here? Take a second. Did you get it? It is the appeal to the populace, which you've probably heard of as the bandwagon fallacy. Notice her argument has zero to do with whether capybara fur is actually nice or comfortable or ethical. Nope, it's just everyone else is doing it, so you have to too. It's just peer pressure dressed up to look like an argument. Okay, round 2. Action star Buck Cheatham is defending his new movie. He says, haters say that my last movie was too violent. But you can't be against all violence. Smushing bugs is violence. All right, what's he doing here? What's the fallacy? Yes, that is a textbook straw man. The critics were probably talking about all the shootouts and explosions in his movie. I'm pretty sure nobody was arguing that you have to be against all violence, right down to smushing a bug. He built a ridiculous, easy-to-defeat argument so he could completely ignore the real criticism. So we've gone through a bunch of these, but let's just be super clear about why we're doing this. This new toolkit, it's not about winning every debate or being that person who just yells fallacy at everyone online. That's not the point. Really, at the end of the day, learning about these patterns is like mental self-defense. It gives you the power to spot when you're being manipulated. Whether it's in an ad or a political speech, it helps you question what you see and hear, and most importantly, to think more clearly for yourself. And that's really the main takeaway. Once you know what to look for, you'll start seeing these patterns everywhere. So the question isn't if you'll see one, it's where are you going to spot the next one? Happy hunting!